Yeah, dude.
Hello everyone and welcome to Tech Tactics Live, episode 68. This is actually an intervention for Manny.
Yeah, right.
Just kidding, just kidding. Well, if for those of you that have been collecting a while, may have amassed a number of Porsche or PCA items in your basement, closet, or maybe full garage, you'll want your significant other to watch this because it'll make you seem as though you're just barely collecting. Because today we're going to be talking about confessions of a true Porsche hoarder. And when we use the word hoarder, many people thought we were being negative. I mean, I look at it as that's the ultimate respect.
Well, I think when people look at collection sometimes, they look at it as hoarding. They're not appreciating the finer aspects of what Porsche Memorabilia collecting really is.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to go over today. But first, a little bit of a housekeeping. We want to thank Pirelli, our sponsors. Without their support, none of this would happen. For those of you that are watching tonight, I'll be monitoring the live chat. Those of you watching later, be sure to give us a thumbs up, a like, subscribe, comment. We're looking to get to 100,000 subscribers, and each and every one of you can help. Now, as I mentioned, I have Manny Albin here, our technical director. He's also a fellow collector / hoarder. And our wives many a times trade stories of the stuff that we buy.
Yeah, it's, well, we call it investments.
Investments. But the star of the show tonight, past PCA region president, past club racer, co-founder of the Porsche LA Toy and Lit Show, past president of PCA, a Scholar Award recipient. The list goes on and on. Oh, and by the way, I think he's 53 years as a PCA member, and I know your first year was 1967. But there was like 1 or 2 years you were figuring things out. So that's why the math doesn't exactly work. Mr. Prescott Kelly.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's go through, if you wouldn't mind, Robert, throw up the agenda just to let folks know what we're going to be talking about. The story, Prescott's story, how he got into all this is amazing. So it would be remiss if we didn't understand how he got here with Porsches and Porsche Memorabilia. His favorite items to collect, he's going to share some of those with us. Current items that some of us mere mortals could possibly collect, we're going to share those. And then, of course, he has some tips that he's learned over the years from collecting. So if that sounds good with you, Prescott, Manny, let's jump right into it. So, Prescott, how in the world did you land at PCA and Porsche Memorabilia collecting?
Try to do a short version. Got into the cars when I graduated from high school. We were all Tri-5 Chevy fans, and half the senior class had Tri-5 Chevys. Mine was a 55 Carl and Gray. And we had one kid, Eni Camp, who had a turquoise and white 283 Fuelie, which was the fastest car in the group. And at graduation, one of our classmates was given a red 56 Speedster, and that car was a revelation. So we didn't know what to do, and we were so impressed with the car, but we knew nothing about it. Fast forward 2 months, I'm back home in Pelham, New York. I see in Roden Track that there's a national regional race at Bridgehampton. Buzz over there. happened to take my mommy's Packard four-door sedan, not a good car to take to an SCCA race. Had to park it in the back of the parking lot, hidden by a tree, and go watch the race. And there's a gentleman there with a little maroon speedster that is beating up on Bob Grossman in a Corvette and Walt Hankston in an E-Type Jag. And I said, wow, that's really impressive. That little tiny car is that quick. Go over to him in the paddock. And so I knew from the printed program that it was Bruce Jennings. Had no idea who he was.
Oh, wow.
I said, Mr. Jennings, can you explain to me why your little car is as fast as the Vet and the E-Type? And he said, it's a long story, Sonny. He said, but if you want to sit here and hand me tools while I adjust my brakes, I'll tell you what I can quickly. So he asked for a box 13, and I said, I'm really sorry, Mr. Jennings, what's a box 13? So he knew that he was with a real innocent guy. He said, you just keep my luckies going, and I'll handle the tools. So my job for the next 20 minutes was to try to blow out on a Lucky and light it. He chain smoked Lucky Strikes. So he explained to me why Porsches were special. I was impressed, thought I'd really like to get one. Had to fast forward 6 years till I got out of grad school, still driving Chevys, when I bought my very first 356, 65 SC Coupe, charcoal, slate gray over red.
Oh, wow.
And that started me down the line. Joined the Porsche Club that year, let a year lapse in 70 because I went to a picnic in 1970 and the number of 911 owners outnumbered the number of 356 owners. Oh. Said to myself, well, the club's going, just
a different direction.
Different direction. I said, these 911 guys don't know which lid to open to find the motor. I said, this is just bad, bad, bad. I went home and pouted for 10 years. But I kept my membership up after I rejoined in 71 so I could get the Mart. And of course, loved the Mart. 74, I probably had about 6 Woody wagons, 2 356s, an old Packard. And I decided I wanted to do more in Porsches, but didn't have any room for any cars. And I decided to buy the literature for my 63 cab. Met Jim Perrin, who ran an ad in Pano, bought from him my very first brochure, and Robert, that's 65. And it was $12. I remember it to this day. That's a standard sales brochure from 1963. I overpaid by $5, but what did I know? And that became my very first purchase.
That's your first piece ever. First piece
ever.
That's so
1974.
Cool.
And Ken Purdy was writing advertising for Porsche in those days. And this is one of about 6 brochures that Ken Purdy wrote. He was a New York-based copywriter, actually lived up here in Wilton, Connecticut. And yes, when they had his estate sale, I was there at 5 a.m. waiting for the door to open.
That'll be one of his 5 tips for collecting.
Read the obituaries.
So Prescott, this photo of that brochure, is that like a recent photo? Do you still have that piece, or?
Oh yeah, still have that piece. Of course.
Wow! After all these years, you kept it. It's in pristine condition. Look at that.
Now, I keep them in big books and plastic slip sheets, legal size. And actually, let me show you one of those because that's perhaps important. Hold on, I'm checking the list, which is.
So Mr. Perrin was one of the first people you met that was into collecting Porsche literature.
That's correct. And then he became Robert 6510, and then Jim became my good friend. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a big book. It's a 3-inch binder, a legal size book. It has legal size plastic slip cases into which A4 size, i.e. European, i.e. German size brochures fit without sticking out the top, so the tops get ruined. So if you want to collect literature, you buy a legal size binder, you buy legal size plastic sheets. You can order them at Staples. They're really cheap. And that's how you keep your literature. And I have 8 of these books. And they're 3 inches, and they hold about 75 pieces.
So is there a type of plastic? Like I know, like when you go to museums, they talk about chemicals,
Like
and
acid-free.
acid-free and stuff. Like, did you worry about that, or did you just
Yeah.
them not to get wet and not to get spiders or whatever?
I gotta say, I just learned something because I got tons of literature and I've just been stacking them one on top of the other. And I know what happens. They wear if there's movement. You learn that from comic books and from baseball cards that you always keep it in plastic to prevent the wear.
Yeah.
And after all 30-some years, I just realized this is the way to store literature.
Look, Mandy's learning something new already.
I got to go to Staples tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works very, very well. I've never had a problem with discoloration or the plastic sticking to the material. Not
Nice.
ever. And because they're designed for legal papers, I suspect they're a little higher quality than some you could buy. And they are vinyl, but they're very dry vinyl, so they don't get sticky. They don't sweat. And they're cheap, so it's just a very good way to keep things. And they fit on a bookshelf, and you can take 400 pieces of literature, put them in 6 or 8 books, and that's a good-sized collection, by the way. And it only takes up, a foot and a half on a bookshelf.
All right, so I'm gonna ask you the same question that my wife Loanne asked me. I have collections of literature and magazines and stuff. So after you collected that first brochure and put it in whatever sleeve to protect it, how many times over the years have you looked at it?
Well, because I show that car a fair amount, and I think
you're
the
so
original
lucky.
one in the book with the 63 cab. I have a book I take every time I show the car that has every single piece of literature for a 62 or 3, a 356B, a T6B. So I actually have 2 sets of all that stuff, one in the car and one on the shelf. So I've actually looked at that fairly often. But I have many, many pieces of literature that I acquired and never looked at again.
But I imagine you keep it in some kind of order because you can't possibly remember everything you bought.
Chronological.
Okay,
Keep them in chronological order. Yeah.
So
Other than that, it's random.
So from brochures and pamphlets, what's the next level? How did you creep up even higher into the memorabilia and collectability ladder?
Well, first, you want your parts manuals, and you want your workshop manuals, and you want your owner's manuals, and you want a complete owner's manual kit with the battery guarantee and the battery instruction sheet and the radio kit. You want a complete owner's manual kit for any cars you have. Of course, early on, I took that to a manic point where I acquired all the owner's manuals I could possibly buy because you never knew when you might have that car. And it would be good to have the owner's manual on the shelf.
Just in case you get the car.
Just in
I love
case.
it. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to start collecting stuff just in case I buy that car. I'm going to get a GT3 4.0 brochure. Let's do that.
So back then, how many different language brochures? Did you stick to English or did you buy different language brochures?
Well, initially I bought both German and English. And I want to show you the very first brochure from that Porsche ever issued, and that I'm going to show it to you on Dur Whites, and we can talk about that. Hang on one second.
And what Prescott is doing, for those of you that are watching, he sent us a treasure trove of photos, and he numbered them to help Robert out. He's calling out numbers so that Robert can pull up the right photo.
Okay, Robert, this is going to be a screenshot of the Gamun brochure. We numbered it number 6. That's it.
Oh, I've seen that
Okay.
before.
I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the very first sales brochure issued, and it's a little truncated. Across the top in white, it says Porsche on the top scene. You can see the little bottom of the PORS.
Yeah.
And this is a very early drawing. This is before Eric Stringer got involved. This was done by a guy who did Volkswagen and Hanomag and some brochures in Germany. And this is the inside spread below. But this is interesting. So this is how this went. I didn't acquire one of these for about 10 years. And I'm comparing it with Jim Perrin. I had Jim Perrin and Tim Kuzer with me, who were my early compatriots in crime. And we're reading it, and Jim says, mine's different. So that led to my having to have all 4 of the very first brochure printed, which was English and German. And Porsche started off with 1,231 cc's, which they then moved to 1099, so the car could race in the under 1,100 cc class. So the very first brochure is 1,131 cc's, aluminum bodywork in the text. Second one is 1099 cc's and steel in the text. So it took me about 5 years till I got all 4 of those.
How many?
And then,
Sorry, not to
Yes.
cut you off, but how many do you think of those were ever produced?
we have no idea because in those days they didn't put the print quantity on, but I do not think it was a tiny quantity like 100 or 200. I think they probably printed 1,000 based on the number of them that survived 50 years later when we went looking for them. And here's one nuance on sales brochures. A guy comes up to me at the lit meet and he says, I have the #1 brochure and I think I'd like to sell it. And I said, well, if it really is the #1 brochure, I said, which is red. And he said, yeah, I know it is. Said, I picked it up at a dealer in Strasbourg. And I go, oh, do you have it with you? He said, well, it's out in the car. I said, go get it.
Whoa.
So he said, well, can I look around first? I said, no, just go get it.
Nothing else
So
matters.
he went out and got it, and he came in, and it had a dealer stamp on it.
Oh.
Most of the brochures of the very first brochure, Gammon brochures, were mailed out to people who wrote into Porsche and says, please send me literature on your new little car. Because they read about it in Rotor Track or Automoto Sport or wherever. And so most of them were sent out in an 8x5 envelope, and therefore the vast majority of them are folded because they were mailed out to people, and that's how they got in this one. And I had 2 of mine had been folded, 2 not. And this one came in, of course, he picked it up at a dealer. It was mint, and right here in the lower left-hand corner of the front was a big dealer stamp.
Oh, wow.
And so we know that's one that was actually distributed through a dealer. And the story was the kid and a friend of his from Dartmouth, the 2 of them were Dartmouth grads. After they graduated in 1950, they bicycled through Europe. And they stopped at this Porsche dealer because they didn't know what a Porsche was. And they picked up that brochure, and he kept it until about 1990, 1993, 4 or 5 when he sold it to me. Anyway,
Wow.
so the nuances are language. There are a few out there in Arabic. The Sweden distributor printed a lot of great brochures on his own, so everybody has to have the Swedish brochures. And today, in the modern era, we basically just concentrate on English. You don't have to get German or Swedish or Arabic to get the images. Now the images are all common, the language changes, so we don't care.
Now, Prescott, how did you tell? I mean, back then, was there a worry about counterfeits?
Yeah.
Or fake ones?
Not in those days. Reproduction literature came along about mid-late 80s. And then in the early 90s, counterfeit sterling silver plaques given by Porsche of America to outstanding salesmen, outstanding dealers, a very clever former Porsche of America employee whose name will go unmentioned, but his initials are MS.
Don't get me in trouble. Don't get me in trouble, Prescott.
Started making in Mexico the fake sterling silver dealer awards.
Oh.
And they're all out there in distribution now, something you have to be wary of. And they look like the things right next to VU, except they're sterling silver, and they're fake.
Oh. Can I rewind? And this is probably
rewind.
a tacky question, but I think every collector probably wants to know, like, so that first brochure, are we talking, if you're able to find one today, a couple hundred, a couple thousand, 10,000? Like, what's the range and price for something that to me seems like it's so incredibly rare?
Yeah, the latter number. And the one with the dealer stamp is probably 50% more than that.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, all right. Well, since we're talking about, I have a piece here. It belongs to PCA, and you know about it because you showed it to me, but we're very proud that we have it, and it also is a rare piece of literature, and this 1955 factory greeting card. Would you mind sharing with folks why this is as important as it is?
Well, the Porsche family decided very early on, and the first holiday greeting card that I had was a 1953. I'm not sure that's the first one, but it's the earliest one any of us have seen. And it makes a little sense because remember that in 1950, by 1953, the company was receiving big royalties from Volkswagen for the design of the Beetle. And that allowed them to build the Works 1 and move out of the Hoarder hut. And it allowed them to do some more expansive advertising and sales promotion literature. And these cards were lovely. You'll notice on the 55 card, it has an embossed 356 on the cover. Some of them were beautiful. See the embossing down here on the lower left. And the embossing was expensive, and they did some wonderful 4-color, 5-color prints on old Heidelberg presses with multiple colors. They might be even 8-color prints, but they were very, very high quality, and they were done in limited quantity for the factory to send to their dealer principals, their distributor principals, and friends of the factory. So my favorite Jim Perrin story, by the way, Jim was president of PCA back in the 80s, the guy I bought my first brochure from, and he became with me the original, the two of us were the original founders of the Porsche and Vintage Volkswagen Literature, Model, and Memorabilia Meet, which we now just call the Lit Meet. But Jim and I were partners starting that up in Chicago, and then we moved it to LA after 3 years, and it became a great big success. But Jim had this great thing. He made a factory trip very early on in his enthusiasm for Porsches. He met some people. And the next year, he was very careful to send to Ferry Porsche's secretary, Herr Bott, Frau Baer, Christmas cards. And the year after that, he got Christmas cards from all of them. And he does that to this day. So he has the completest collection of Christmas cards of anyone we know, the most complete collection of Christmas cards of anyone we know. Very clever man.
Very cool.
So anyway, that's a story on holiday cards. They're very rare. I had maybe 5 or 6 dupes that I went to sell to Lit Meet, and I couldn't get a lot of money for them, which surprised me dearly because I think they're just treasures. But I love that 55 card. Beautiful card.
All right, what else you got for us?
Let's see. So we talked about the #1 brochure. Let's talk a little bit about racing material. Because racing material is kind of fun. We don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But Robert, now I want to show you one thing, for example of Robert, go to 6518, please. 356 literature, we've seen a little bit of, we've seen 2 brochures so far. So this is a nicely embossed cover. This thing is an A4 size, so it's 11.5 by 8 3/8 with an embossed cover. And then Robert, let's go to 6520, please. And it opens up, and it's double size. We didn't get that one turned over. But inside, it's 20 pages of these huge 11.5 inch, it's 11.5 inches tall, and it's like 17 inches wide. This huge deluxe brochure, this is for a 65 911. And this is a good example of what Porsche would do with a deluxe sales brochure. And of course, they still have these today. They have the small ones they'll hand out in the dealership. And then if you buy the car, they'll give you the one that's the book, actually a bound book. Robert worked his magic. He told me he had to download it to do that. So anyway, that's what it looks right side up. A wonderful brochure. It's rare. It's not hugely expensive, but it's an interesting one to see. Let's talk just for 2 seconds about 6521, Robert. Something that's useful to people to have all the time, whatever model car you have, is your accessory book. The accessory book for 356A, this is a 1956-57 book, when they call it Qualitest Accessories. And if we go to 23, please, Robert. And in it, they will show you the accessories for your model. So let's say that you have a 356A with what we call on-the-body driving lamps. That's it on the left. And some judge says to you somewhere, or some Yahoo, where'd you get the Western Auto driving lights? And you go, pshaw, let me show you the Heller lamp the Hella lamp in the factory accessories catalog. Page next to it. Let's say you have a Speedster and it has a bench seat. How do you prove that Speedsters came with bench seats? You do it with the accessory catalog, and there's a bench seat in a Speedster. Of course, you could also want the Cardex, which lists all the accessories if you can get the Cardex, and there are ways. And if somebody needs to know how to get a Cardex after this, they can get to me. But it has all the build information on 356s, and they were available through all model years through 69, the Cardex. After that, you have to go to build sheets. Next, I want to show us color charts for a second. So let's go to 6530, please, Robert. Now, here's a bunch of color folders. This can be very useful for a car owner to have because it shows you the available colors and the special colors. And let's open it up to 6532. Oh, wait, let's stay here a minute, Robert. Give me an out view. So you'll see I did 356s down the right-hand side, 356A, T5B, T6B, T6C. On the left side, a 66, 911, 912. And then a 914, 914, 6, 70, 71, 911s, just to show you that they went on. And they still have them today. Today, they're mostly A5 brochures and they're folders. And I decided not to show those. So let's do 6532. And 6532, this is what the inside of an old one looks like. Again, this is 356A's, 1957. It gives you the color, Meissen blue, which looks gray here because in the last, what is that? In the last 60, 70 years, the colors have changed a little. But you have ruby red, you have black, you have Meissen blue, you have light ivory, fjord green, silver metallic, aquamarine blue, which they didn't print. But the chips on the right-hand side are aged versions of those colors. And then out here on the far right are special colors, which are graphite gray and, I can't think of the name of the red. I'll think of it in a second. And so these were special colors. Oh, that's orange, 5712. And so these were special colors you could order on the car.
What's amazing is a lot of these colors, you've heard of them recently because
They're back with Porsche.
They're back.
Sample.
They're bringing them back with paint to sample. I mean, yeah, very cool.
Exactly. Friend of mine, Robert Rath, tried to order his 2019 Speedster in fjord green.
Yeah.
And the factory said, "Good luck, bub." But a couple of people must have done it because they brought back a whole bunch of greens and they brought back slate gray, obviously, and they brought back a whole bunch of the blues. Okay, let's see. Let's just take a little bitty look at race car stuff. A couple of things that would be, if actually race car stuff is good for collectors, it's not good for users. But let's just look at one example. Let's 6513, Robert. Okay, so this is an RX60 parts book and an RX60 owner's manual. And this is, and not all the parts books were this big and this wide on the early race cars, 550, 550As, RS60, RS61s, 904s. But the RS60 parts book is really special. It's a ring binder, and do 14, please, Robert, and then 15. And it's not too much unlike, so this is the fly leaf on it. It's kind of cute. I like the artwork. And then let's do 15. And the inside parts pages are very much like what we're used to for all the 356s up through 911s. You get an exploded diagram, and then you get a description in 3 or 4 languages and the part number. So race cars are very much like normal cars, except, of course, the pieces are much rarer. And if you want to collect the race car stuff, it's all available. It's just money. You can always earn more money. But if you find the book, as Manny says, when we get to our 5 rules, get it now because it won't be there when you decide you can really afford it. Let's move forward to 6564, please, Robert.
So while he's pulling that up, can I ask you a quick question? How has, some folks that may have this and take a photo like you just did, and now that might live on the internet and people can see it, has that helped or has that hurt, the value of all of these collectibles?
Because almost all these things are multiple pages. Seeing what's out there and what exists basically helps. And I'm going to show you a website in a minute that's a great place to go. Okay, this is an original FIA homologation set of papers for a Carrera 2 GT. And it's, and inside are all the parts that are homologated. I'm sorry, it's not a Carrera 2 GT. It's a 1600 Carrera GT. Inside are just a whole bunch of pages where Porsche literally takes a photograph, a little black and white photograph, they cut it out and they glue it down. Wow. And that becomes the basic homologation booklet for that model. They did it for all the Spiders. They did it for all the Carrera coupes that were raced. And then the FIA, and you'll see the stamp on here, it says Accus down here, right over the photograph. They stamp it, which makes it official. And then they send it out to the various sanctioning bodies to show that this car is now a legal FIA homologated car. So these become highly collectible for guys who have racing cars, Carrera Speedsters, Carrera Coupes, all the way up through RSRs, the 73 RS, which was homologated for Group 3 racing. The RSR was Group 4, and 936s, 962s, et cetera, et cetera. All of those cars have homologation papers, and they're fun to collect. So anytime I found a set of homologation papers, I would buy it up. Most of them are like this one, which are FIA issued. I think I traded this from the SCCA archivist many years ago. And, but Porsche also has them, and the Porsche ones are stamped. Porsche AG or something like that on the cover with a blue stamp. And when you get one from Porsche, I personally like those a little better than the Accus or FIA ones. Okay, next, just for fun and giggles, for something that would maybe be useful to our listeners, is 6538. Porsche printed booklets for so here is a booklet for information regarding vehicles used for sports purposes. That basically means hill climbs, autocrosses, and racing. And this is 911S 1914-6 from 1970. And the one on the right, back out for me, Robert, the one on the right is 1969, you can tell because it's got an L in it. So in here, what you have are all the various options for sports car racers to outfit their 911 or their 914-6 from the factory. So, and this was how you substantiate that the pieces on your car, which are purely competition oriented, were factory issue or not. Well, of course, you have to know what they look like. So you need photographs, which you don't get in these books, but you do get part numbers. And so there was a very, very expensive Bruce Jennings driveway car. It was a Dr. Sullivan car first, upstate New York. Then Bruce bought it. Bruce used it as a street car, except he took it to Marlboro one day because he didn't want to get another car out of the garage. He drove it to Marlboro and raced it. And it was a 69 911 prepared for racing. And it sold for 4 times what a normal 69 911S would sell for, because it had been outfitted by Dr. Sullivan with a really good road race spec. And a huge, well-known collector bought that car from R.M. Sotheby's about 5 years ago. And it was a delicious piece because it was like a garage find. It was all original. So those books help you substantiate your racing parts, what you should have on your car, or what you can put on your car.
So Prescott, those books, that's what I know, like the R Group live by, because
Yes.
that's how they outfit their cars, or at least base their cars on. Is that also what the ST back in the day was? Is that how you built an ST using this book?
Yeah,
And parts from this book?
Yeah, you take a 70, 71, 72 book, and that's how you build an ST, which was never a factory designation. It's really, it's a cute story. They built race cars out of 911Ss and out of 911Ts. They built most of them out of Ts because the Ts, believe it or not, were lighter than S's, the basic body shell. Doesn't make any sense, but if you weigh them, that's evidently true. So they liked to take a T-tub and then they'd outfit it with, for example, a 2-liter S engine, or if you wanted a twin plug, they'd put a 906 motor or a 911R motor, same motor, into it if you could race a twin plug. SCCA didn't allow twin plugs except in the prototype classes, so you had to have a single plug, which bought you whatever the raciest 911S motor Porsche would build for you. But they would custom build a motor. Well, because it was usually a T-tub with S mechanics, it began to be known as an ST. Was never a factory designation in the day.
So the S and the T don't stand for anything other than super and touring, which is what they were basically two cars made into one. Because you know, we talked to people from the factory, although they'll deny that an ST is coming out since it hasn't been officially announced, but the rest of the world knows that a new ST is coming out. And I asked them what ST stood for. No one could explain to me what ST stood for. So now we found out.
That's a huge,
we found out. I figured the man would know what ST stood for.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you go back to the early days and read the factory descriptions of their race cars, that nomenclature never comes up. When I first met Jürgen Barth, and I'm sitting in his office in 1982, and I said to him, I want to learn more about STs. He didn't have a clue what I meant. When I said, well, the 70, 71, 2.3 cars, or the 72, 2.5 car. Now, remember that for FIA, your race car could be 100 cc's over. So a real ST is going to be 70, 71, 2.3, probably a twin plug, and probably an aluminum, not a mag case, for reasons related to stretching on the magnesium and overheating on the magnesium. Your 72 real STs are going to be 2.5s, 100 over the stock 2.4 that year. And I ended up racing an ST for most of my 37 years of racing because I just thought it was a trick little car. Nobody knew what they were. They were 260 horsepower as a long stroke and maybe 270, 275 as a short stroke because you could take an old 2-liter crankshaft and put it on bigger pistons and cylinders, and you get more torque. And so it was a short stroke I thought was a slightly better motor, and I tried both. But anyway, it was a car that nobody knew, and you could sometimes get underclassed with that car because it helped your race. If you showed up with an RS, everybody knew what it was. If you showed up with an RSR, you're out there, competing with 917s and 908s, and that's no fun. Well, except for taking pictures as they pass.
So if the ST was never recognized from the factory, does that mean there's no sales literature for the ST?
That's correct. You will not. If somebody has a sales brochure that say from any time between 69 and 72 that says ST in it, it's worth a lot of money to a couple of people, one of whom you're looking at.
All right, so to keep us on track, this next segment I'm kind of excited about because we're so far behind your level of collecting. The next segment we were going to go over is current items that you have, and we have a couple items here, and your thoughts on, for those that are watching, if they want to get into collecting, what do you have to share with us?
Okay, let's take a look at something that I think is pretty pretty neat, and we're going to skip the books, but I want to show you the Carrera GT stuff. Okay, Robert, let's go to 6546 and then bring up 6547. So this is a fairly recent car, Carrera GT. Now, Porsche is going to keep bringing out supercars. So these two kits happen to be really nice kits. So this first one is a black, and this is a slip cover in the middle of the picture. It's an embossed slip cover. It's like a record set. It's like you buy, the 2-set album of the band. This is the way that came. Well, this is just a slip case, and you pull open the slip case, and that big gray brochure in the upper right, pen out, Robert, the big brochure with the CD over it pops out, and then the other things are in there, including the letter, the Carrera GT sales brochure, and the 2 postcards, and that whole thing fits in this black box on the far left. Won't take you through the boring details, but the letter says, "Dear Porsche sales manager, please use this kit to send to the guys who have ordered a Carrera GT, blah, 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 blah." And see, that's attention Porsche sales manager.
Yep.
So this went out to sales managers who were to give it to the guys who bought the car to stall them while they waited for the car to come. Okay, next one. Then, so a lot of the guys who ordered the cars got them, and the dealers had these. The dealers sent some out, some they didn't. And if you knew a dealer, you walked in and say, "Hey, I want one of those Carrera GT pieces I just heard about." And if the sales manager's a buddy of yours, you get it. Okay, so the Carrera GT comes out, and they issue this white box. So the big white box on the left contains this silver box that's next to it, which is an aluminum cover that opens up. Next picture, please, Robert.
Oh,
And
the
then
engine.
You open that up, and inside is the sales brochure, a tape, a VHS tape, and the model of the motor.
How cool is that?
Which is your V10 motor, derived from the Footworks Formula One motor, which was a stillborn project. The Footwork Porsche Formula One car was stillborn. So they used the motor from 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, and made it the basis for the Carrera GT because they'd invested in the tooling to make the motor, and that became the motor for the Carrera GT. So this kit was an important kit. It's very, very nice. The sales brochure slides in and out of the top. It's open on the right-hand side so you can slip it out. It's a hardbound brochure of about 24 pages. And back in the day, these things were readily available on eBay and from your sales manager at Porsche. And then when guys started selling their Carrera GTs, they'd keep these and then they'd say, "Well, I don't need it." Of course, they never called the owner and said, "Would you like the promotional kit that goes with your car?" Instead, they put it on eBay, and I get one. Except I think I bought 6 of these.
Wow.
And how much do they run now?
Interestingly, now they're, I think I sold one to a friend of mine who had a Carrera GT. He was a buddy. I think I sold it to him for $2. If I put one down on my table.
2,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, just make sure to clarify.
Sorry. And if I put one down on my table, I'd probably ask $2,500 for it.
Okay. Ah.
So let's think about modern cars, GT3 RSs. I bought my 997 GT3 RS in January of 2020. I hadn't collected any GT3 RS stuff, so I had to immediately find out what was available. So I talked to some owners, I find out what they had. I talked to some literature dealers and people, find out what they had. John Bell in San Diego is really good on new car stuff because he's got an in to a few dealers. And he gives them $5 a brochure or something. He sells them for 50. He's happy. I'm happy because I can get it. And so I found out what I needed. And it included, I should have gotten it for you, but it's in the car. It included a little model rear wing of the big wing on a 9972 GT3 RS.
Oh,
and of course I had to have one.
Oh, cool.
So took me 3 weeks to find that. And so I would concentrate on stuff for new models. So let's start with maybe 07 GT3 RSs, 9972, 2010-11 GT2 RS, GT3 RSs, and up to 2016, 2019 GT2, GT3 RSs. And then when an uber special model comes out, GT3 Tourings, I would collect literature on. Normal GT2s, probably not. Normal GT3s, probably not. GT3 Touring, all the RSs. And if they bring out something like a new 918, we all had to buy the 918 books and boxes. If they come out with an Uber model, I'd collect that. Otherwise, I would go back and collect older stuff just because it's fun.
So I guess it helps out having a friend at a dealership, or preferably PCNA, because I know you can go to a dealership, you can pick up the free literature, but there's something above and beyond that. There's the giveaways they mail to prospective customers that you'll never see at a dealership. And they're very nice little boxes you get sometimes. Like you said, with
the
the
little
wing.
silver boxes.
Yeah, I think that one of the RSs had like it opened up at the center lock. Nothing I ever saw at a dealer, but I happened to get it in the mail one time from Porsche. And I would love to get on that mailing list really badly.
Well, you should still be on the mailing list from having
No,
been
I'm not.
president of PCA.
He fell way off that
I fell
list.
off that list.
Oh, that's so bad. Yeah, well, if it makes you feel any better, I did too.
So can I ask you, because many of us, and we always say this, don't buy any of this stuff with the anticipation that you're going to make a ton of money. Buy it because you love it and you have it, and then if you happen to make money later, then that's just the extra cherry.
That's part
on
of
top.
being a hoarder, is you're never going to sell it.
No, I'm like, I say that all the time to my wife. I got a good deal, and she's like, well, what does it matter, because you're never going to sell it. But my question to you, Prescott, because I know Manny and I collect diecast cars, and I have two 1/18 scale diecast cars. These are actually two Baragos, and Baragos aren't, they're not it's super detailed. They're not crazy expensive. There's like the CMC models, which I think when they first came out, they were like $300, $400, but now if you buy them on eBay, they're approaching $1,000, which is great on your return on investment. But to someone that just want to have fun, Baragos or UT models that are out there, here's two Baragos that I have. And to the untrained eye, they're pretty similar, and they probably should only cost you $25, maybe $50. But I love them. But the reason why I brought them is to show that they are actually not equal at all, because this light blue one, the light blue one here, I've never seen anywhere else. And if any of you that are watching have this blue one, please let me know. It's original paint. It's painted in the same way this yellow one is, but I've never seen a blue one. I've never seen the treatment of the wheel where it's blackened out. And just little details of that car made it unique. And honestly, it just makes me happy that I have it. So. Sure. What about you also have model cars, but they're like the tin ones, and I know I don't have a single tin one, because every time I try to buy a tin, I think they're called Distlers, they are four figures.
64.49, Robert. So not too many years ago, actually, a very well-known collector in Reno was putting together his museum.
I know.
Lovely man. Well, we can mention him. He's out in the public. He's Ransom Webster. Lovely guy, self-made man. And he was putting his car collection together. And he said to me, can you help me? I want to put posters. And if everybody who sees his collection on the web, his walls are covered in posters.
Factory
so
posters.
I said, I'll sell you a poster collection. And at that time, I happened to have two. So I sold him 400 posters, which included everything in the Lewandowski poster book, and everything that I had more than one of stretching forward. And he covered his walls, literally floor to ceiling. I'm guessing they're 20-foot tall walls. Everywhere in his car museum is covered with a poster. So he paid me a small fortune for the posters, and then he spent 2x or maybe 3x to mat and frame them all.
Yes, I remember that.
Now I'm going to stop you here, because people are probably wondering why did you call Prescott a hoarder? He's just showing us one piece at a time. And we went over to Prescott's house one time.
I know where he's going
with this. He stores his posters in old blueprint drawers.
Yep.
Which was a genius idea. I never thought of storing posters that way. But the quantities of each poster was mind-boggling. How many?
He basically corners the market by dripping
I think
these
you
things
have like
out.
100 or 50, 200 of the 1970 24 hours of Daytona winning.
Oh, he's not going to give you a number. He's not
No,
gonna give
it
you a
was
number.
like this thick.
It was
you
a
know?
thick amount.
I felt like I went back to 1970 at the printer, and it was just coming out of the machine.
You're giving away
they were
all
like
of Prescott's
flawless.
secret. He's rethinking this whole interview.
So, okay, so on posters, the trick was in the old days, each distributor got a tube of posters, about a 3.5, 4-inch tube. And I think they had 25, 30 posters in each tube. And of course, I've always been a swap meet aficionado. In the old days with my Woody wagons, I go to the ACA meet in Hershey. And then in 1978, I heard about the Mechanicsburg Porsche only swap meet. Well, had to do that. So, and for that, you show up at 5 in the morning, you get in line. And it was held at the Mechanicsburg Porsche Audi dealer. It was then became Ski Round Top. Then it became the Hershey Central Pennsylvania region Hershey swap meet. Central PA still runs it, and it's now at the Carlisle Fairgrounds. And fabulous swap meet, just fabulous. So in about 1980, which would have been about my third one, I go into a mobile home real early as soon as the guy pulls in and said, "What'd you bring?" And that's one of the keys. You want to get to the vendors before they got everything laid out, because they're going to bring out clutch plates and shock absorbers and radios, and you don't care about that. So you stick your head and said, "You got any paper?" Don't use ephemera. Most people don't know what that is. Paper. You got any paper? Sales literature, posters, blah, blah. And the guy said, "Yeah, I brought all these tubes. I work at Mid-Atlantic Porsche distributor, and we have all these old posters." And I said, "How many tubes you got?" And I don't know what it was. It was like 15. I said, "Well, how many posters are in them?" He said, "I don't know. Some of them are full, so they got 25. And some of them aren't full, so they maybe, but all of them have at least 10 or 12. I said, "What do you want for all of it?" And
Wow.
he said, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe $1,300, but I should find out what they're worth and sell them singly." And I said, "Oh, you have no idea what a pain in the neck it is to unroll a poster, show it to somebody, and try to get money for it while you're holding it open. Oh, by the way, the wind's blowing."
Yeah.
I said, "I'll give you $1,500 for all of them." Boom.
Sold.
And I've been selling those ever since, because some of the tubes were dupes. But yeah, the 69 to 73 posters that you saw small stacks of came from him and from my good buddy Tony Singer, who is an ultra premium, fabulous poster dealer out of Carmel Valley, has his own website, autoposters.com, I think. Very, very knowledgeable hobbyist who became a very major dealer, and he runs the Monterey swap meet at the Embassy Suites. And he bought a whole bunch of posters like that, but they weren't valuable enough for him. So fortunately, he sold them all on to me.
Prescott, can we do a little speed round where I show you some of the collectibles that we have in the back, and if you could say a couple of words of those items, and then we'll get into your 5 tips for collecting. So
let me bring up one thing. Robert, hit 6449. How much time we got?
I don't have that one.
You don't?
No, sir. Sorry.
Oh, hold on. Oh, anyway, it was the Distlers. Never mind.
The Distlers.
Okay.
So this
Boom,
is.
there we go.
So your thoughts on this? You know what this
Volume
is?
1, number 1 of Pano, December 1955.
Yes,
First
sir.
issue of Panorama. And Panorama collections, of which I've had maybe 5 complete, with the original Volume 1, number 1. A wonderful collector for anybody in PCA, along with all the parade memorabilia. Ashtrays, wall plaques, grill badges, et cetera, from parades. Wonderful collectible. I have 2 boxes full of nothing but parade collectibles starting in 1959. I think it's my oldest stuff. Pano, very collectible, very useful. I still use my Panos to look up and read Leonard Turner's wonderful test drives, because Betty Jo would promise Leonard a good dinner if he'd go test drive the new 356 SC or a 904, and they're very worthwhile having. Go.
All right, next we have these. Manny chose these.
So this is, I'm sure you've seen this, but this is the book that the museum gave to us as a gift to the club. It was, I believe, maybe the funeral or the memorial service for Bussy Porsche. And I
Yes.
don't think they sold this to the public.
They did not.
Yeah. Have you ever seen this for sale anywhere?
I have not seen it for sale anywhere. I have seen one, but my friend who has one is not parting with it because he went to the service.
Oh,
Right.
all right. And this next book?
So this is when
The
people
Fog
are
book.
looking to collect books.
Yes.
I always tell them that the factory books, and I'm not sure this would be considered a factory book, but Peter Falk obviously was an integral person who worked for the factory in the racing division. And this is, I think it's a great way to start collection of books if you don't want to buy vintage books, is to buy books from, for instance, Alwyn Springer's coming out with his book, Norbert Zinger
Yep.
came out with the book, and it's a
Yep.
great way to start your own collection and learn a lot about Porsche history. Lego. Who would have thought that
Yes.
Lego would become so big in the Porsche community, but it has. I don't
It
know if
has.
these are appearing at the Lit Show yet,
Nope.
but
Not
it's,
old enough.
Not old enough. But at one point it will, and at one point the adults were children at one time will remember these Lego cars.
That's exactly right. Oh, and the pillow cars.
Yeah, so
Boom,
this is
pillow cars.
yeah, this is my favorite because I turned Boo on to Margie Smith Haas's famous Porsche pillow cars, which obviously you know the history behind them, where she made them at I think the San Diego parade. And the
Yes,
family and the Porsche family saw them and fell in love with them and asked her to make some for
Yep, 1975.
family members, and it ended up being a business. I wrote an article on Tech Tips about collecting, and this is a perfect example. So this was something they gave away at the Sebring 12 Hours this past weekend at the Porsche PCA hospitality tent. And
Ooh,
anyone
good
came
point.
in could pick one up, whereas our PCA members usually do. They pick up two. And
They go
what
in
was-
twice. Get one
Exactly.
each time in.
Well, now you just grab two. They don't even fake. But it was pretty cool because they only made 963 copies of this poster, which it says right on the print. And evidently, they're making one for every race they go to. So this is a great thing to collect if you want to collect the whole series of posters from the season. I was hoping they were going to win Sebring, so this would have made it even more valuable to have this, but unfortunately they didn't. But this is a good example of something that was literally free that you could start a collection with.
And I know
Totally agree.
I know you've seen this a lot, and you see this at a lot of people's houses. Do you know much of the history of how this came about?
Yeah, that's an aftermarket item, unless you actually go there and take one down and risk arrest. And that's how Manny got his.
I was gonna say, how much time can you serve? You think?
Which reminds me, of course, of the famous stories at parades where people want, and also races, where people want to steal the big banners. And at the Charlotte parade, we caught somebody cutting down the big banner that held down from the, flowed down from the balcony into the lobby.
Yes.
But if you can get things like that, a friend of mine, for example, made friends with somebody in Monterey who took down the big Rinsport banners, the 10-foot wide banners, and rolled them up and sold them afterwards.
Oh my
So there are lots of different ways to get really good collectibles. You need to be ingenious and think about it. Stealing them is not a good idea. Getting hold of the people charged with taking them down and disposing of them is an excellent idea.
I don't know if you were in the EC at the time, but at a Sebring Porsche Platz years ago, they stole the billboard in front of the Porsche Platz, which was held down with thick steel cable and it was illuminated with spotlights. Porsche came the next morning and the billboard was gone.
Empty.
And they still talk about that, how someone stole that.
It's in
Well,
someone's garage.
Paul Greger caught me looking at things, kind of greedily. And pretty early on, he gave me one of those huge banners. It's 4 feet tall, 20 feet wide, from a Porsche Platz. He sent it to me as a Christmas present. And so I never had to steal one.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this collectible that sort of It's a healthy collectible because you can ride it.
It's never been used, right?
This one is belongs to one of our members, Gregory Brown, and he's put at least several thousand miles on it, and it's a great fun. These things can still be had anywhere between $500 to maybe $4,000, $5,000, depending on the model. But you can ride a Porsche and have good health.
And you can supplement that with a toboggan from the mid-'60s, a Ski-Doo from 1959 and 60, and in between they did different things. So there's a Porsche brand on a fair amount of sports equipment, not made by Porsche, but Porsche branded and sold by Porsche through the dealer network in very small quantities, but they're not that expensive.
All right, let's go through your 5 tips for collecting.
Actually, a little bit more than 5, 7.
7, okay.
Yeah, I can, you tell me that I can talk for an hour, I arranged for 2. So you asked for 5 things, and I couldn't get it down to 5. First, go to the places where the material is. Toy cars, literature, parts books, workshop manuals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Swap meets, like the old Hershey meet now at Carlisle. Essen in Essen, Germany, March, April every year. The Stuttgart Classic meet. Stuttgart's a good one for Porsche because, of course, it's home turf. And some of the stuff from the old employees, Porsche employees took a lot of stuff home because it was going to be their retirement plan. And then Retro Mobile I missed the M, or Robert did, Retro Mobile in Paris. Really great places to go to find material. Read club ads. 356 Registry, Pano, the Mart are the best. eBay, always click the worldwide button. Don't settle for the US. Go worldwide because some of the best stuff is in Europe. Rindlist, of course. The Facebook buy sell is coming up. Not bad. Old book and toy stores, especially in Europe. I wandered into one in Bristol, England that my wife found. And I got in there and they had all kinds of early books and Disler toys. PAG, PCNA, and dealership employees would be great contacts to develop if you have access and a way to do it. You should be able to co-op one of your dealer people to help you if you buy new cars. If you don't buy new cars, don't even think about trying that route. But do look for people who retire. Ask for more. So go long term. Guy walked up to me once with a beat up 356A owner's manual. And he said, I saw that you had one for sale for $200. And I said, I'd like $200 for this. And I said, this thing's beat to dickens. I said, it's really only worth $50. And he goes, oh, and he's very disappointed. I said, look, I'll give you $100 for it, which is what I'll try to sell it for. But if you ever come across something else, think of me. The next year, he walks up to me with a box of about 100 items in it, and they were wonderful, and I bought the whole box. So think long term, pay fair price, and remember that somebody you pay a fair price to today is going to be the person who calls you in a year to buy something else, and that's how you get the really good stuff, because they hold the good stuff back. And then Manny's #1 rule, which I put on last as a bridge, which is buy first and think about it later. If you run across something and you think it's rare, don't walk away to go think about it. Instead, just buy it and then go and think about it. You'll be happier. I got one little codicil on that, which is a friend of mine, Tim Kuzer and Jim Perrin, walk up to a guy selling a very, very, very rare wooden 356 at Carlisle about 30 years ago. It's called a Zwink. And they walk up to him and they say, how much do you want for the little Zwink? And he says, oh, $40. And Jim goes, $40? Because that was a hell of a deal. And the guy says, okay, I'll sell it to you for 20.
Oh,
so that was object lesson #1. Object lesson #2 is one of those guys found something very nice that was way overpriced. So they had me come over, pick it up, look at it, and say, wow, $200. That's going to be really hard to sell for $200. And I put it back down after saying that to the guy. And Jim cycled along behind me and bought it for $100.
Did he just share with us his hustle? That sounds
think
like
so,
that sounds
yeah.
like a hustle. That's a swap meet hustle. I'm not
Yeah,
above
but-
doing that, but I'm just saying he just shared a
But-
swap meet hustle.
You work in
It
tandem
was an
pairs.
it was an honest $100 item. The first one was a mistake because he was surprised it was that cheap at 40. The second one, the thing was way overpriced. He sold it for fair retail.
There you go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I figured this hour would go by quickly, and it certainly did. A quick few items. April 5th, as Manny mentioned earlier, Alan Springer will be in the house.
Studio.
In studio at PCA National Headquarters. And so we're going to be able to spend time with him. Don't miss it. Put it on your calendar. Porsche Parade Phase 2 also opens April 5th. We have Works Reunion Monterey coming up. And of course, we talked about Run Sport Reunion 7 coming up. PCA Podcast 54 is now out there, so take a listen. We'd love your support there. So again, be sure if you enjoyed the episode, hit the like button, subscribe, comment. We'll catch up to your questions later as well. Thank you, everyone, and take care. And thank you, Prescott.
Schedule Springer for 2 hours.
Scott.
Most fascinating man alive.
I agree.
Wonderful, wonderful guy.
It's gonna be a treat. All right, everyone, take care. Thank
Good night.
you.
Thanks,
Night,
Prescott.
everybody.